Welcome to this introductory presentation of individualized supports for students who are deaf-blind. This initiative was developed through a collaboration between the New Jersey Department of Education and the College of New Jersey. There are 5 modules in this series. This is Module 3, Deaf-Blindness 101, Part 1. And shall we begin? Topic 1, Introduction to Human Development and the Impact of Deaf-Blindness. The domains of human development are cognition, communication, social, emotional, motor, and sensory. Let's chart the influence of sensory functioning on human development. Think about this. Consider the impact of a combined vision and hearing loss on the domains of global human development. As we just said, motor, sensory, social emotional, communication, learning and cognition. Motor, how does a loss in both distant senses, hearing and vision, influence motor development or the role of movement? We are motivated to navigate the environment because we can see and hear others and objects. We coordinate movement experiences with our sight and hearing to create fuller understanding of the world. Sensory. How does both vision and hearing loss influence sensory development or the role of the sensory system? Our distant senses, hearing and vision, provide us with critical information so that we can be aware of our present environment and anticipate what will occur next. The primary avenues for learning in schools are visual, approximately 60% or more, and auditory, approximately 30% or more. The impact on social emotional development. How does both vision and hearing influence social emotional development? The combined use of our distant senses provide us with frequent opportunities to engage and interact with others, as well as provide information critical to those interactions. And our sensory system assists in our development of self and body awareness, including ourselves in relation to other people and other objects. Communication. How does vision and hearing loss affect communication and its development? And remember, communication in the 2 parts, we are both senders of communication and receivers of communication. Cognition and learning, incidental learning, concept development, access to scope and sequence of learning experiences, and mental imagery. These are tools for establishing cognitive concepts and that are the basis of all learning. The process of early intervention for the baby who is deaf-blind focuses on the direct hands-on instruction and also focuses on the needs, requires individual intervention within typical daily routines. This is where it must take place. The process of early intervention also focuses on the preparation for generalization and transfer of all learning and information. The use of alternate sensory avenues is encouraged. For the child who is more visually impaired, the intervention may focus on the use of residual hearing, and vice versa. For the child who is deaf and does not access the auditory world, the emphasis may be on using residual vision. Early intervention must also provide opportunities for discovery and exploration. your experiences for a moment. Think about how many observations using your senses you've had today. Probably lots of them. You could take a moment and list each of these as you can remember them. Examples might be, well, it was sunny today. Mary had on a red skirt. I smelled smoke in the kitchen. The Fruit Loops tasted sweet. You can do this as quickly as possible. It'll take about a minute. In considering deaf-blindness and the impact, we must rethink the brain itself. Our old thinking focused on how the brain developed depended on the genes we were born with. But our new thinking now is that how the brain develops hinges on a complex interplay between the genes we're born with and the experiences we have. Deaf-blindness can impact these experiences. Old thinking in terms of the brain suggested that the experiences we had before the age of 3 years had a limited impact on later development. Some impact, but it was limited. In our new thinking, we understand that these early experiences have a decisive and highly important impact are not only on what we learn, but the architecture of the brain itself. The nature and extent of adult capacities is dependent on these early experiences. Language, for all people, is shaped by our experiences. And it is caught in the environment, not taught to very, very young children before the age of 5 years old when they attend school. Oops. Language and experience. Young children acquire language by associating a word or a concept with something that has captured their interest. And remember, young children prior to the age of 1 year of age have thousands of exposures to language and the experiences that go along with them before they ever speak their first words. So, and it's all about what interests them. The fleeting interest of a child is what drives his or her language acquisition. Anything within sight or hearing can capture a child's interest if paired with language, and then new words are learned. If a pairing between interest and language happens repeatedly during daily activities, the likelihood of the child's language learning to describe the activity or the thing of interest automatically increases. We do not teach parents how to do speech therapy. We try to teach them how to make the most of their children's teachable moments as events and activities arise in the environment. Those moments are teachable and are just ripe for teaching, for providing language input. Did you know that vision and hearing are your distant senses? You probably knew that. 90% of all learning is acquired through distance senses, approximately 90%. And 95% of all learning is through your distant senses. 90% of all learning is incidental. That means we catch it from the environment. Language is learned incidentally by young children, the first languages. Incidental exposure to language or experiences only occurs if the child is within eyeshot and earshot and arm's reach of those experiences. Did you also know that spoken language is learned primarily through the auditory channel? And concept development, basic concepts, are learned through a child's interaction with his or her environment. Learning processes from known to unknown. So we always want to attach that which is familiar and known to the new and unknown that we're venturing towards. Meaningful repetition is the key. Repeated experiences allows the child to search for understanding and predictability that leads to a deeper comprehension. Young children seek repetition to learn the basics. You only need to look at children's literature to recognize that. The repetitive nature of children's literature feeds that seeking of repetition. Older children and adults learn from exposure to novel or new information, and they apply it to what they already know. How many exposures to a new concept does it take for a child to learn? Well, the answer is simple: as many as it takes. There is no definitive answer as to how many trials. The more interested the child, the faster he or she will learn. We know that. And again, it goes right back to what we said before about capturing their interest. Hearing and vision loss interfere with awareness, and oftentimes without access, there is less interest. So providing access is critical to fostering interest. I like to think about deaf-blindness this way. The disability is not so much the hearing and vision loss per se. The disability is access to information. The senses, particularly hearing and vision, are the entry points at which all information arrives. Our senses allow and support all of our learning and development. Hearing and vision really do help the most for the hearing sighted child. For that child who is not hearing and sighted fully, we have to find different entry points, alternate entry points. Where is the impact of hearing or vision impairment? Well, let's look at input for a moment. Sight, sound, taste, feel, touch, movement, and action moves into process, and the output is the child's response, also known as child behavior. This is a basic theory of cognitive process, the three phases: input, process, and output. Input, process, output theory is the foundation of effective practices. In early intervention, we redesign our efforts in order to modify the child's outputs by manipulating inputs. As the educator, we look at the child's behavior, the answers on a test, the responses on a task, on a psychological exam, and make assumptions of the child's processing ability. From that, we diagnose the problems and design new lessons, or we reteach the old lesson. What if the problem lies in his or her ability to access information or access clear, accurate information day after day? The problem for children with sensory impairment lies in the input, which may be inaccurate and ultimately cause the difficulty with the output. For example, if a child cannot crawl, there is usually an occupational therapist on the early intervention team. Why does the child crawl? If he isn't crawling because he doesn't see well enough to be interested in reaching out to anything, or what if the child has a language delay and not because of cognitive issues developing language, but because he has hearing loss that was a barrier to him being exposed to language repetitions. Those are examples of input issues that impact the output. And that is the conclusion of Module 3, Deaf-Blind 101 Part 1. Please be sure to fill out the post-test at the conclusion of this.